Our ancestors built in stone what God wrote in our bodies. The pilgrimage that I'm going to be sharing with you today to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand precisely decodes how sacred architecture mirrors our own personal sacred anatomy. The brain being our tabernacle, the heart as the lamp, and how visiting temples, sacred temples built by our ancestors, and practicing Kundalini yoga meditation rewires generational trauma into sovereignty. I mean, think about it. Why do some families keep repeating tragedies? Patterns of abuse, neglect, addiction, sudden deaths, toxic relationships, betrayal, infidelity, while others finally actually break free. The answer is actually in our temples, and it's not just those that are built from stone, but the ones that God has built into our bodies. We are the sacred geometry. We are the temple. On my recent pilgrimage through Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand, I was able to experience and witness how sacred architecture mirrors sacred anatomy. Every temple is a reminder that the true temple is actually within. The brain as the tabernacle that the Bible speaks about, the heart as the lamp, even stronger than the brain, the nervous system as the arc that connects it all. And today, on this new episode of the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement podcast, which has taken me some time to integrate, to be able to share, I'm going to be sharing with you how land literally calls you, and how each land on my pilgrimage that I visited and said yes to, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand, revealed lessons for breaking generational trauma and truly stepping into sovereignty. Before we begin on our journey of the actual pilgrimage, I want to share with you some things that have been said in the Bible about our own inner temple. Because the Bible, especially the teachings of Jesus Christ, were were and are esoteric. It's knowledge that you only can remember because it's something you already know through your heart. And the problem with religion is that it has manipulated what Christ was teaching us and what the Bible says in a way that keeps you enslaved, continues to make you feel guilty, which neuroscience has proven how you being told you're a sinner since you're a young child, based on what religion teaches, can actually and has actually negatively impacted and deteriorated the brain. So I want to share with you a couple of things first from the Bible that point out the truth of how the temple that we're all trying to reach is actually within us, and why our ancestors built these sacred temples in the exact sacred geometry as our own brain. You see, in Exodus, God commands, this is Exodus 25:9, build the tabernacle according to the pattern I show you. But what was the tabernacle? Well, that was the portable temple, a pattern of heaven on earth, a structure designed to host the presence of God. And if you look closer, the brain actually mirrors that same design. In fact, I'm going to be sharing with you some of these findings that I was able to experience through visiting sacred temples in Cambodia and Vietnam and in Thailand, and also other parts of the world and other pilgrimages that I have taken, like Chichen Itza in Mexico, or even in Machu Picchu in Peru. So the way we need to understand how the brain mirrors the same design is, think of it this way. When the Bible spoke about these outer courts, what it was talking about was the dura mater, which is the brain's tough outer covering. When the Bible speaks about the veil, what it's talking about is like this delicate web layer of the brain. It's known as the arachnoid. And when we talk about the most holy place, what we're talking about is the seat of the soul, the pineal gland, which literally lights up the entire body structure. And Christ often spoke about entering into the seat of the soul or sitting at the seat of the soul, the pineal gland, through meditation. It also speaks about the cherubim, if I'm saying that correctly. And that references the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, where God dwells between. So to access the place where God resides, we meditate and we change the arc of the covenant, because the arcs of electricity carry signals, which are your thoughts, feelings, and emotion, just like the arcs over the arc of the covenant. And even though the brain itself does not produce the thoughts, it is governed and also led by our nervous system, which together combined create consciousness. Consciousness is not created in the brain. The neurons don't know the color red, grief, or pain. Consciousness is downloaded through the brain, as think of it as a radio receiver. And based on the programming in the brain and in the nervous system is what dictates the consciousness and reality that you're creating, because it's the program. If you're constantly programmed for patterns of generational trauma like abandonment, abuse, neglect, then this arc of electricity, the thoughts, feelings, of emotions, they're attuned, this radio frequency is attuned to your belief that you are separate from God. That's what trauma does to us. Colonization, war. But if we meditate, we can change the electricity currents that occur between in the brain, between the left and the right. Meaning through meditation, we train the brain, and what we do is we actually turn on what is known as the microtubules, which lie inside of the neurons that quantum physics show are constantly connected to the universal mind, to God. But trauma dilutes this connection and makes this electrical shock or electrical currency of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions to be of a program where you feel alone, where you feel scared, depressed, angry. And that all derives from patterns of generational trauma, being raised in a home with chaos, abuse, dysfunctional relationship patterns, and not because we're trying to find someone to blame, but knowing that our parents were dealing with their own patterns of generational trauma. And even when you think about the angels that protect the temple, what this really is angels of light that enter into the temple. But if you don't meditate and if you are running on patterns of generational trauma, which impact and deteriorate the brain, like literally shrink the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex stops functioning, no compassion, no empathy. All this is like blockage that then does not allow the angles or the angels of light, of sound to come into the brain, which is why Kundalini yoga therapy or Kundalini yoga in general is the science of angles, because we create perfect angles through the sound, through the mantra, through the way we position our hands, the way we position our body, which then allows the light to come into the temple. That's exactly how Kundalini yoga works. It rewires the nervous system and the brain so the light can come through, and we can change and rewire the brain, making then the heart the lamp. So think of the brain as the tabernacle. That's the temple. The nervous system, yeah, it's the arc between them. And together they form the inner temple that God always meant us to keep lit. And that's the heart. The heart is the essence, the experience of the divine. And the divine sits in the brain, ready for you to access and connect through meditation. Now, as I take you now through the pilgrimage, I wanted you to remember all of these things that I've shared with you because they're all going to be important. The brain, the nervous system, the rewiring, and the experience of God within you. And I want to share with you how each of the places and the countries that I visited recently specifically taught me more about this inner temple and how important it is to revitalize and restore the inner temple through meditation in order to truly take your sovereignty back. To begin with, our journey began, my husband, my two sons, we decided that we were going to go to Vietnam. It had been a while since we've been receiving messages about Vietnam, whether it was someone talking about Vietnam, whether it was popping up everywhere. We pretty much looked. There were too many synchronicities for us to ignore. So we actually first decided that we wanted to go to Cambodia because that's where Angkor Wat exists, which is considered as one of the wonders of the world. And these ancient temples that my son was talking to me about, how there was a deep connection between the Mayans and the Mexica and the Nagas, which are serpent gods, serpent deities, and how in Cambodia the Nagas were very much alive and they were displayed in these beautiful temples. So when he told me about Cambodia, I was like, oh my God, we need to go to Cambodia. And then when I looked up the trip in itself, it showed that Vietnam was really, really close. And then so was Laos and so was Thailand, two other countries. We had been receiving signs to go to Vietnam, so we assumed, yes, this was the perfect opportunity to go to Cambodia and Vietnam. And then we were thinking about Laos as well, but we had gone to Thailand 9 years prior to that. And we thought it would be a great idea to return back, especially since so much in our lives had changed. And we absolutely fell in Thailand the first time that we went. So we started the journey with Vietnam. And so we took a flight, very long flight. It was actually kind of a journey in Arizona and Phoenix. There's not a lot of flights that are like direct, or there's not a lot of international flights, believe it or not. So a lot of the things have to be, we always have to take like these connecting flights either through LA or through San Francisco, a lot of the times even through Texas, depending on where we're going in the world. So we ended up going to San Francisco first. And then after San Francisco, we took a 10-hour flight from there to Tokyo, Japan. And then we had a small layover in Japan, which was wonderful and beautiful. We got to eat some of the amazing food, but also like take these pictures with the traditional tea outfits. It was really, really fun. And eventually one day I would like to go to Japan. It's just right now it's completely overrated. And I think it just became TikTok famous. So I go to places based on the land calling me. And there's a reason why we call these pilgrimages. It's because there's a deeper going than just, oh, it's a vacation for us, right? So we decided that we would go to Vietnam and we would stay there 5 full days and that we would explore both South Vietnam and North Vietnam. Now, one of the things that I was really, really blessed with is that on my way to Vietnam on the plane, 10 hours from San Francisco to Tokyo, there was like a 10-part docu-series on Ho Chi Minh, the leader who took his sovereignty back from the Vietnam War, and what really happened in the Vietnam War. We have to understand that there's a lot of propaganda that gets to us. And it was even worse in the 70s, back when we were not connected through social media, because they could really lie to you about a leader and then make up excuses of why they needed to go colonize this country. And that's the same story that has been repeating in all these other countries. There's been genocide in Cambodia. There's genocide as we're seeing it right now in Gaza and Palestine. And it's always like the same culprits using the same excuses to take the power. So I was really, really blessed to be able to watch that 10-part docu-series on Vietnam, because by the time I got to Vietnam, my gosh, my perception and my understanding of what occurred there had completely changed and shifted. And when we got to South Vietnam, which is Ho Chi Minh City, that was formerly known as Saigon, and it is now the capital. The city in itself is beautiful and gorgeous. And just to give you some feedback on some of the questions I received, you do need a visa to enter into Vietnam. It was very easy to get the visa. We applied for it. It took about 5 days online. And once we had our visa, we were ready to go. But in Vietnam in itself, when we got to Ho Chi Minh, we only wanted to spend a couple of days in the actual city because we're more into like nature. We're more into like, being out in the jungle type scenario, in the green. And Ho Chi Minh was the capital. So we thought to ourselves, oh, it's gonna be just like a very busy city. So we're only gonna spend 2 nights here. Well, we quickly regretted that because Ho Chi Minh City is gorgeous. It's pristine. It's so clean. There's so many things to do there. We were able to actually take a boat tour on the Mekong River, which is the biggest river that runs through all of Southeast Asia. And our tour guide was absolutely amazing. We still remember him. We have his WhatsApp. So to keep in contact with him because he just was like so fun and really was so rooted in love with his country and his culture that we learned a lot from him. So we ended up doing that, and then we ended up going to these villages where we learned about their snake wine, which gives men the ability to have lots of kids. And I don't drink alcohol, as you all know, but my sons and my husband definitely participated in that, which was really crazy. There was like a serpent inside of wine, and they drink it. And then we also went to see how they make different types of coconut candy and coconut drinks and all of that. We had a beautiful lunch after going on the river on these canoes, and just the people were so nice. Everything about it was amazing. But we also got to explore the actual city, which again, lots of shopping, lots of things to eat. We took one of those big buses. Everything is sort of affordable, by the way. The food, the tours, everything incredibly affordable, way more affordable than even going to Mexico or other parts of the world where we've been to, like Greece, or even, of course, we all know Europe is not cheap at all. Spain, and we've been to Paris, and definitely prices were way higher there. But the Ho Chi Minh City in itself was very memorable for me because I got to really visit Ho Chi Minh's statue. We tried to get into the museum, but the day that we went to, we were flying out to North Vietnam that day, and we didn't have enough time to get in because they had closed it for something that we're doing there. I don't know if it was a ceremony or something was going on inside of the museum. And his body actually has been mummified and is still there in that museum. And the sad part about Ho Chi Minh is that for like as long as the Vietnam War was going on, the government from the United States basically lied to its people about the fact that they were not winning the war and why they were even there. And this is constantly the thing that they do. It's like they talk about these leaders and they make them look like the worst to the United States people. And the reason they do that is so that they could have an excuse to go in there and commit genocide, commit war. And that's what was happening. But in the documentary, what they showed was how much the US government actually lied to veterans, to the United States people about why they were there, but also that they were winning when they were not, and that they could not win this war. And the reason why they could not win this war was because of a great leader known as Ho Chi Minh. And his leadership was not about control. He became part of the people. He dedicated himself to his people. He decided he would not get married or have children because there was so much that he needed to do. And the major point about Ho Chi Minh as a leader was about the decolonization that had to occur, restoring dignity to his people, restoring their rights. Because what ended up happening is that Vietnam was infiltrated and they put in the same characters, a false, corrupt leader in North Vietnam, and they literally forced North and South Vietnam to fight against each other. And it was Ho Chi Minh who was able to finally stop this and to end the war within his own country, and for them to realize where the root cause of all of this was happening. And this colonization pattern, like I said, in Cambodia, we're seeing it now in Gaza, we're seeing it throughout the world, is a pattern that continues to get repeated and that causes a lot of patterns of trauma. We met one of the tour guides told us there how his mother, this happened in the 70s. So there are still people that are alive that went through this. And his mother, every time she hears an airplane, she still runs inside of the house and she's terrified. This is what generational trauma does to the body, to the mind, and to the spirit. And the thing is that as a mom, when she was pregnant with her son, who was our tour guide, she was wiring those stress responses already in his nervous system. And even some of the stuff that they were doing, I don't remember what it was called, but it was a type of gas that was poisoning. This is when finally the world woke up and saw what was happening. But there was a gas that was poisoning all of the Vietnamese people. And they created this gas so that the gas would impact not one generation later, two, three generations later. So they were very tactful in this genocide where they wanted to make sure that people were going to stay sick for generations to come, which then creates a lot of physical, mental, and spiritual types of problems, right? So this, as cycle breakers, what I learned here is that we also have to decolonize. And I learned the true meaning of leadership through Ho Chi Minh, because what it means is it's time rebellion. It's refusing to repeat the survival script. It's creating new containers, new boundaries, new timelines for your own lineage. It takes an immense amount of leadership to do the generational healing work because it's not about finding someone to blame. It's about changing the program for yourself and seven generations before and after you. And that was one of the things that Ho Chi Minh really, really portrayed as a leader. He didn't have energy leaks. He was an intelligent man, learned 24 languages, learned how to find collaborations, and learned how to inspire the spirit of their own people to fight for what is right, their sovereignty. And that's what Vietnam gave me. It gave me the power of leadership, of focus, of breaking cycles, knowing that it is not a passive type of work. It's active stewardship. It's choosing sovereignty for generations ahead over and over and over again, while other people are tucking things under the rug, pretending like they didn't happen. And so Vietnam in itself was very impactful in the way that I now lead and in the way that I now see myself and in the way that I see all cycle breakers as ultimate decolonizers of the patterns that have kept their lineages under pain and repeating abuse and grief. And so Vietnam was the perfect way to begin the pilgrimage because bringing those teachings into my heart took us into Cambodia, which was exactly what I needed. Because in Cambodia, I learned to live with the heart lamp on. Now, Cambodia, as some of you might have heard, there was a big genocide that occurred in the 70s as well. And Cambodia, a lot of people might think it sounds maybe like a country that is very poor, but Cambodia, especially where we went, Angkor Wat, excuse me, Siem Reap, which is the city or the province where Angkor Wat is. Angkor Wat are the actual temples. The entire city was incredibly pristine. The people were the kindest. I mean, in Vietnam, they were super kind. It was so beautiful, everything we did in Vietnam, from going from South Vietnam to North Vietnam, Hanoi, where we did like the Ha Long Bay. We did bike riding in the actual fields, the rice fields. We actually did this huge hike. It was so tiring up to the top of a dragon. Everything, everywhere you looked was gorgeous. Hanoi was like crazy wild on the streets, people just moving fast everywhere. Lots of people live there too. It's the second biggest part of the city in Vietnam. So going from there to Cambodia was like a complete change because in Cambodia, first of all, buildings cannot be taller than the actual Angkor Wat temples, and everything is just like so much more less crowded and just like it's not definitely quieter because there's still a lot of movement, but it feels like more like you're inside of one huge temple. And it's what you see for sure, but it's also like the way you're being treated. Like again, people are constantly bowing their heads and saying thank you, and they're just so kind and generous. And so it felt like I had to return back home. You know, the color of my skin is very similar to the Cambodian people, and I have eyes that are kind of they're almond shapes. I really felt like I fit in even with my looks. And a lot of times I get questions of like, what race are you? Because people don't realize that I'm Mexican, right? and definitely with strong indigenous roots. I come from the Purepecha tribe comes from Michoacan, and my whole features, everything about me, my eyes, my color of my skin, my hair, I very, very much look like my grandmother on my mom's side, who has really strong indigenous roots and indigenous features as well, which I'm very, very proud of. But it was kind of cool to be able to go to Cambodia and to feel like at home, not just because of the way I looked, but also just because it felt very like a place where I had been to before. So when I got there, it already felt like my heart was opening up. Like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Thank you, God, for giving me this opportunity to listen to my heart and to be here. So I was already like in complete ecstasy. And then getting to Angkor Wat was a completely life-changing experience. I would equate it exactly to when I went to Peru, to the Amazon jungle, and I work with plant medicine, Mother Ayahuasca. Angkor Wat, for those of you that don't know, is the largest religious monument in the world. It is actually designed, from what I researched and experienced, as the duplicate of the human brain. And all temples are done this way. This is why I was sharing with you all at the beginning that our inner temple is the brain, but these ancient ancestors of ours knew that they could create sacred geometry, meaning the sacred geometry is the brain, and that they could create these temples so that we could offer our devotion to God. And that because these temples were created in sacred geometry, specifically the position of where they're sitting on Mother Earth, to the stars, the structure, the shape, everything basically is a replica of the own tabernacle inside of you, which is the brain. And they did this so that they could do ritual inside of these temples, meditation, other types of rituals like dance. Why? Because if they built a sacred structure that was the exact replica of your brain, and then you went in there and you meditated, you could alter your consciousness. That's what psychedelics do to you. Mother Ayahuasca, when you take her in, she changes the brain. Mushrooms are the same thing. There's so many studies out there. Even John Hopkins University has studies on what it does to the brain. But that's what these temples were made for. They were created in this sacred geometry so that you could go in there and change your brain. Your brain being the most advanced technology so that again, you could heal, you could travel to other dimensions, other realities. That's why they were way more advanced than us. And when I think about Angkor Wat, it is exactly designed as specifically the brain. There's five central towers that to me represent the five lobes of the brain. And there's a central spire, there's positions where there's temples where you actually enter into specific areas, either the left or the right, and they impact specific aspects of the brain and of your body and mind and spirit. And all of it is done in precise, exact sacred geometry, even the way that the temples are aligned with the sun, and even the guardians that protect the temples. Those are the angels or the angles that I was referring to as it relates to angles of light coming into your brain to light up the temple so that you can experience the divine. So think of walking these ancient temples of Angkor Wat like stepping into a psychedelic experience. And you can experience this through plant medicine for sure, like mushroom or ayahuasca, but you can also experience this through meditation, Kundalini yoga meditation specifically. That's why Jogi Bhajan, when he came from the East to the West in the 60s, he's like, let me show you how to get high on your own supply. Let me show you how to secrete the DMT from your pineal gland. So you don't have to ingest these substances because we can actually do that ourselves. Not that there is anything wrong with that? Yeah, of course, if it's done in a safe environment with trained, experienced shamans or in a psychotherapy setting, that's when you're going to get the results. If you're just mistreating these plants, abusing them, if you're not doing them with respect, not preparing, like going into dieta, which is a cleansing of your body before you even integrate these teachings, if you're going to random people's houses, like that's not the way we respect these plants. The reason why I had such a life-changing experience with Mother Ayahuasca was because there was like a process that led to that, right? And I didn't go chasing her. She ended up finding me. And so we can compare it to the way that psychedelics put us in these altered states of consciousness that change the brain, because the architecture itself in these temples changes your brain and changes your heart rhythm. So, for example, I went to one particular chamber where we were really, really blessed that our tour guide was actually an archaeologist, and we have his WhatsApp information, so we still stay in touch with him because we plan to definitely go back, and even through the nonprofit organization that my son created, the Sovereign Planet Foundation, to apply to be able to help in the restoration of these temples, because in the magic and the miracles that happened there was incredible, and it felt like, again, it was deeply connected to the same Mayan teachings, Mexica teachings, the Nagas, the serpent everywhere. But there was one particular temple, part of the temple, where if you pound like your arm or your leg or nothing happens, right? You can't really hear anything. But if you pound your heart, like the entire temple echoes, and the pattern just vibrates throughout. And the archaeologist was explaining this to me, and there was a gentleman who asked him as part of our tour, he's like, "Well, don't you just think it's coincidence?" And the way that he explained it, and when he was explaining it, I did that to my heart. A flood of tears completely came over me. It was like my ancestors were saying, "Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for remembering who you are at the heart." It was like my whole brain vibrated into the state of ecstasy, that all I could do was purge and cleanse and cry. And it was so interesting because the archaeologist didn't even think it was weird that I was crying. He looked at me and with his eyes, because to me he looked like a wizard, just wise wizard. And he looked at me and he made eye contact with me with no words said. That meant, "You're experiencing what I'm trying to describe in words, and it's safe and it's okay." And that's the moment that broke me completely open. That's when I realized that the sanctuary I'm building, the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary for women, my virtual community, to disrupt generational patterns of trauma, it has to be built one stone at a time with my heart. And it's not that I wasn't building it with my heart before, but because I'm a very logical also thinker, being a Capricorn, I think about, the logistics and the strategies and all of that. A large part of my generational healing journey has been healing my heart. There was so much grief and trauma in my lineage. My grandmother went through so much grief and trauma with all of the people that died silently in our family's life, including one of my uncles who died at a very young age from heart problems, all because of the grief that we carry, and also even religion making us into martyrs, not realizing the power of our heart and our brain to access God's inner temple for help and assistance through our journey. And I learned there how important healing the heart was, and wow, the role that Kundalini yoga had taken as the path, as the vehicle to do this. And that my whole journey of generational healing had led me to this moment. This uncle of mine who died of heart problems at a very young age, he has been a guide to my son, my youngest son. In fact, my mom has always said how my son, my youngest one, is like a direct essence of my uncle who he has never met. And my son, not ever meeting my uncle, is so connected to my uncle, knows things about my uncle and stories that no one has told him. But because this has been the ancestor who has been guiding him to stop repeating these patterns of grief, who has shown him how to make his life his testimony to open the heart. And it was at that moment that my son said that my uncle came to him in that temple as I was going through my own experience of my heart opening and said, "Thank you. Thank you for saying yes." and for bringing me here. And that's exactly what Angkor Wat is. It's a memory palace, a place for the ancestors. It's a cosmic lamp of consciousness, one that taught me that the heart has to stay lit for the temple to live, and that the way that the heart stays lit is through Kundalini yoga meditation and my devotion to God, which becomes very much disrupted if we've been through patterns of generational trauma. We become martyrs and ask, where was God when I was going through all of this pain? And we do this unconsciously. So the gift that I received in Cambodia, that I'm still trying to integrate and that I will be unloading for lifetimes to come, is the power of the heart. And what happens when a generational cycle breaker like you and I finally heals her heart. And this has been the resounding story, because if you caught my last podcast episode, I shared with you all the journey of my breast implant removal surgery, which happened 3 months ago. And it was all about the heart. So it was like natural for me to come from that surgery and all those lessons that I learned. I'll link the podcast episode below if you missed that one. And to now be in Cambodia in this sacred temple that was completely opening my heart to love, to self-acceptance, to confidence, to knowing that what God had put in my heart as a dream of building this Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary was supported by God, and that all I had to remember was that I was building it like the sacred sanctuary that it is through the heart. So leaving Cambodia was difficult because I didn't want to leave. I felt so safe there. I felt so at home. And I'm not saying that darkness does not occur in Cambodia or in Siem Reap or even in these temples. I mean, every country has its own part of darkness and light, right? But what I'm saying is that the spiritual life is real there. And the power of the heart is known through the divine and through devotion to our spirituality, something that the West is completely missing, which is why leaving Cambodia to me was like leaving home. But I was excited to go to Thailand again because I knew there were sacred temples that I also wanted to visit. And in Vietnam, we also got to visit really amazing temples created to honor Buddha. There's a great mixture of more in Cambodia, definitely, of the Buddhist religion with the Hindu religion. And you can definitely see it in the way time has processed the temples restructuring and all the things that have happened there. But knowing that we were going to Thailand, it felt right. And it felt like saying goodbye to Cambodia was not a goodbye, but a see, I'll see you soon, which I definitely plan on returning very soon. And so when we finally arrived to Thailand, I mean, so much had happened in Vietnam and in Cambodia that it just felt like, my God, how can I learn more here? Like, and Thailand was so amazing. Getting to Thailand was exactly what I needed. And Thailand is like you experience, and nothing is hidden, both the darkness and the light. There's like temples and their advanced architecture. Even the modern one is a combination of like tall skyscrapers, but then the temple right in the middle. It doesn't matter if you go into a fancy Chanel store or a small restaurant, there's shrines in front of these facilities because they're spiritual. Devotion is just as important as the business, right? As the business devotion. And the whole thing about going back to Thailand was that I definitely wanted to go back to Ayutthaya, which is one of the sacred ancient ruins, temples that's close to Bangkok. We actually stayed in Bangkok. And the cool thing about Bangkok, like I said, is that you see the extremes of both. You get there and you see the temples, and then in the nighttime, you go out to the nightlife, which was so much fun. And there's like partying galore. We all know about the red light districts and the lady boys, and there even cannabis is legal, which I was very grateful for, because after coming back from after coming from Cambodia, there was so much that I felt that I had to integrate, that finding cannabis there was actually, I was really excited because cannabis helps me integrate. Cannabis puts me in my heart immediately, which is why I have to be careful of not abusing the plant, because I've I've definitely done that before, and I'm working through that even still because I can get really used to just smoking instead of like processing it through meditation. Which again, it's not that it's a bad or good thing, it's just that when it becomes a crutch, that's when it gets really, really dangerous, right? But getting there, I hadn't smoked for a while and there was so much integration that needed to happen. It was so much fun when we got there on a Friday, or excuse me, on an evening. I think it was like a Thursday evening. And so we went into the nightlife, not to the red light district, but another area where there's clubs and so much to do, food galore, and then lots of bars and stuff like that. And then I saw the dispensaries. I was like, yes. So we went in there, got our pre-roll, and I sat outside and I smoked this pre-roll that felt like just everything lifting for me. And like I was putting together all of that's where it all came to me. Oh my God. Vietnam was the leadership, Cambodia was the heart, and Thailand is the unshakable warrior. Now, why was it the unshakable warrior? It wasn't necessarily because of the temples. It was in Ayutthaya, which is a place you need to visit if you're going to be staying in Bangkok. It's a day trip that you can do. Gorgeous temples. If you've seen some of my Facebook posts or Instagram posts, definitely go check them out. But Ayutthaya, it's such a gorgeous place. And Wat Pho, which is like the golden temple of Buddha. Wat Aran, another beautiful temple. I mean, and here they're restored. I mean, they have the gems, the colors. It's gorgeous, right? And there was so much that was learned through that. But it was the Muay Thai fights. It was the Muay Thai fight. So my husband and sons, they are very much into UFC. And I know a lot of people are against UFC because of the brutality, but I'm very much into UFC fighting too because I really engage with the stories of the fighters and why they're there, right? It's not just about them like hurting each other. And that was the exact same thing that I experienced in Muay Thai. My sons both practice jiu-jitsu. One of them actually competes a lot. So they've always been into this. So of course, going to a Muay Thai fight was our plans to do. We ended up going to two Muay Thai fights, but it was because of the fact that they were just so amazingly spiritual. The Muay Thai fighters, what I saw was the warrior spirit in having a sacred practice. It was so beautiful because in the Muay Thai fights, first of all, there's a traditional band there that plays like their traditional music. And then the fighters always start by honoring their ancestors with this ritual dance that to me looks like a snake dance. And it looks very similar to a dance that my grandmother used to do when she would ask God for like a miracle to happen. They would do this in this little church that's in Michoacan. I forget the name of the city, but if any of you know, let me know in the comments for sure. But she would, and then when God would give her the miracle, or when she would ask for the miracle, my grandma would like take off her shoes and she would crawl on her knees into the church temple so that this miracle could be bestowed upon her. And that's kind of like the dance that these Muay Thai fighters did. They did like this beautiful, like it was like a shuffle, and it reminded me so much of what my grandma used to do. And these dances, they protected them, right? The music, and then they wore this beautiful ancestral gear around their arms and then around their foreheads as they came out. And it just showed how much devotion was needed to the practice. We actually went to the Muay Thai fights in the place where Muay Thai originated. It's a beautiful stadium where you could feel like the years and years and years of dedication and devotion. And the whole country felt like that. Like there were like these warriors, very advanced technologically, but very connected to their spiritual root. And that's what Muay Thai was. Muay Thai is lineage work. It's the nervous system's fight response, I think, is often very demonized, but for cycle breakers, like fight must be reclaimed, and it's not as aggression, but as holy protection. It's like the story of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, or even Jesus Christ when he went into the temples and he overthrew the tables where the money makers were exchanging money, and he was saying, "This is not what the temples are to be used for, not for money." Well, the reason they went after Jesus Christ was not because he was passive. He spoke the truth. He faced the aggressors, right? And Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, if you've ever read it, God is calling Arjuna to go into battle with his own family, and he's like, "Oh my God, how am I going to go into battle like God? Like this is my own family." And God's like, "You're not understanding. There are battles that you are going to have to fight in this physical flesh. But life is not one big battle. And that's the whole thing. Like when we have patterns of generational trauma where there's been abuse or things of that nature, right? Like we make life one big battle. Of course, it's because of all the cortisol and adrenaline running through our body, our brain being impacted, right? But the whole thing is that we all do have battles that we must fight, where we must use our sword, where we must decolonize, where we must stand for the truth and protect, right? But life is not one big battle. And these Muay Thai fighters knew that life was not one big battle and that their spiritual practice of dedication every single day prepared them for the battle when they were in that ring. They also understood that they were protected from something bigger than themselves, their ancestors. They had a connection to their ancestors, which gave them that unshakable warrior spirit. And that's what's lacking in the West. We don't even have a connection with our ancestors. Religion makes it seem like it's bad or evil for you to connect with the dead. When if we do not reconnect with our roots and we don't reconnect with those that we've transitioned, if we haven't forgiven them even, then we are going to repeat that pattern of trauma over and over and over again. As cycle breakers, we have to become spiritual warriors to guard our own inner temple, to fight for future generations and past, to protect what is sacred. And that is why Thailand to me gave me the power of the unshakable warrior. So as you can see, every part of my experience in this pilgrimage gave me this perfect combination of knowing what it means to be a sovereign cycle breaker. Vietnam, leadership, Cambodia, the heart, Thailand, the warrior. Every temple brings light, and every cycle breaker knows that when light hits a fragile temple, it can feel overwhelming. And science explains this, right? Trauma floods the nervous system with cortisol and adrenaline, and that becomes our new norm. The amygdala part of your brain shrinks, making fear very hard to regulate. The prefrontal cortex becomes deactivated, making joy and safety really hard to sustain. And that's why after visiting these sacred places or doing your practice, going into your inner temple, Kundalini yoga meditation, sometimes you feel flooded, right? Sometimes you have intense dreams, or you might even relapse into old habits. Why? Because you're bringing light into the areas of the temple where there was only darkness. And the whole thing about Kundalini yoga is that it rebuilds the inner temple safely. Angels, they direct prana, which is your life force energy. It gives energy order. It allows you to learn how to channel emotions, which are energy in motion. And this arc, it reconnects the brain and the heart. That's the nervous system, right? Because even though we were pre-wired in the womb and wired through our environment, we can rewire the nervous system so we can have brain and heart coherence, the most advanced technology, more advanced than any AI, through breath, through chanting mantra in Kundalini yoga. We restore the rhythm to our nervous system, which restores the rhythm to our heart and our brain, our frequency. It makes the temple strong enough to hold the light. Most of us, our temple is so weak that all we can hold is the darkness. All we can hold are the patterns of generational trauma. God never chose one organ over another. What God created was perfect, a pattern of connection. Your body as sacred geometry. And think of the brain as the pattern, the heart as the lamp, and the nervous system as the bridge. And when you rewire the nervous system and the brain through Kundalini Yoga therapy, you're building bridges so that future generations and current generations don't have to go through that old same road of pain, of abuse, of abandonment, of toxic relationships and addiction. Because when pattern and presence unite through meditation, the temple lives. And we remember that we were never abandoned. Maybe disconnected for a little bit from God, from a higher power, but never abandoned. Now, I want to end with this. And I want this blessing to come to you and your lineage and 7 generations before and after you. May this blessing reach you wherever you are. And may you also remember that what you are seeking not only is seeking you, but lives within you. May your brain remember the pattern of love. May your heart keep that lamp on. May your spirit guard the gate, and may your lineage feel the light that you are turning on for 7 generations before and for after you. So if this has moved you or touched you in any way, please share it with other cycle breaking sovereign sisters like you. Those sovereign sisters who are ready to reclaim their own inner temple. And of course, you can always join us in the sanctuary, Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, where we're rebuilding that inner temple with Kundalini Yoga therapy and A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy. So you can realize that Christ consciousness lives within you through devotion and through taking your sovereignty back. Thank you so much for tuning in. Leave me a comment below of how this resonated. And of course, I'll see you the next one. I love you all so much. Be blessed and Satnam.